there folks, it's Kikoskia here and welcome back to Writing and Me. This video contains no gameplay or music whatsoever, allowing you to focus on whatever it is you're up to, whether it's reading, writing, editing that writing, listening to music, playing games, working, or sitting in the quiet part of a tavern, nursing your drink after a long day travelling through the woods. You're weary, but the fire is warm, the ambience is pleasant, and a bard is playing on stage, getting a mixture of cheers and boos. It is then that the door to the cold outside is thrown open by a wounded man that collapses no sooner has he taken a single step in. You rush to his side and see that there's nothing you can do to help him. He clutches your arm with a bloodied hand and whispers words to you. Desperate words. "The goblins are coming! They're coming from Goblin Keep. They found something there. Something terrible. You must stop them. Stop them before they have plans for dominion over all. Use the caves. The caves under the mill. They'll get you there before the goblins can get here. I tried to stop them, but I was too weak. It's up to you now. Save us. Save us." He is gone. No amount of rousing or healing magic will bring him back. The tavern has grown deathly silent. Everyone looks to you, the most armed and prepared people in the establishment, to go to Goblin Keep. Do you take up the mantle of adventure and strike against the goblins before they have a chance to attack? Or do you turn your back on them and leave? It's all up to you now. That is one of many possible beginnings to an adventure in tabletop role-playing. It sounds sort of cliché, and that's because in many ways it is, but even the most cliché of clichés is fine for beginning adventures when you're very low level. Today we're not going to be talking strictly about writing, we're going to be talking about DMing. It's also known as GMing, but they both mean the same thing, running a tabletop role-playing game. And when I say tabletop, it can be face-to-face or it can be online. Now what I'm going to be talking about today are the similarities and differences between running a tabletop role-playing game and writing a story, because there is a lot of overlap, and there's also a lot of things that diverge drastically. But let's start at the very beginning. What is running a tabletop role-playing game? Put simply, it's one person that is telling a story that other people can interact with. This story is influenced by the decisions of the players, and how the rules determine if they succeed. Often this is done through dice rolls, but you don't need dice to have a role-playing session. There are quite a number of roleplay systems that eschew dice altogether. I haven't played any of them myself, but I know that there are a fair few out there. The dice rolls add an element of unpredictability about everything. You don't know how things are going to go. The players hope things will go well. You hope things will be interesting. Because ultimately, when you're telling an interactive story, you want things to be interesting, and you want people to have fun. That is the most important thing when it comes to running a tabletop role-playing game. Everything else takes a backseat to having fun. If the players aren't having fun, you won't be having fun. And it's important that everyone has fun while this is going on. It's no good either if the players are having a blast and you aren't having fun. If having fun means that you have to bend the rules of the system, so be it. As long as everyone leaves the table, digital or real, at the end of a session, with a smile on their face, many memories of their exploits, and a desire to play again, you know that you've done well. But how is tabletop role-playing similar to writing? For one, they share a lot of the world-building elements that I've described earlier in this series. You need a world for your adventurers to go and explore. Whether this world is a fantasy world, a prehistoric world, a science fiction world, or a world that is eerily similar to our own, but with a few subtle differences that makes it wholly different. They need places to go, people to talk to, and adventures to go and have. And that is where you come in. There are numerous ways that you can go about getting a world for people to explore. The first way is to get a pre-written world and use that, adding things and removing things as is needed. You can go even further and have a campaign for that world, which gives you the adventures set out for you. Of course, you'll need to alter things as your players make various decisions, but a campaign is effectively a story. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, there are plot twists, there are characters, there's an overarching sense of threat, there's usually you saving the world in some form or another, and there's lots and lots of adventure and excitement to be had. There could also be quite a bit of nail-biting suspense, especially when you get to the really difficult encounters. Of course, this is presuming that it's a combat-heavy adventure. There are many role-playing systems that don't have combat, much like there are many books that do not have combat as well. There are slice-of-life role-playing systems just as there are slice-of-life books, but I digress. There is, however, another way to do role-playing sessions, and that is to have a more improvised way of doing things. Something that you can't necessarily do with writing. You have the skeleton of a plot, you typically develop at least one place in some detail, but the strength of improv is that you let the players dictate how the world develops. Whenever they ask you questions or want to go to places, you think of an answer, and you make sure that you keep a note of it when you make that answer, because that is a piece of world building that has been designed on the fly. I'll give you an example. The adventurers go into a village on the way to the goblin hideout. This village is pretty small and unassuming, so you give a vague description of farms and a windmill and a church and a few other small buildings that are scattered about. And then the cleric goes, "Well, we need supplies. Is there a store nearby?" You hadn't thought about if there was a store that would suit them, so you think about it and go, yes, actually there is. There's a building in between the church and the tavern that looks like it might have what you need. You determine this because there are loads of piles of bric-a-brac and a few spools of rope, and you spy what looks like an axe hung up outside as a sign. Do you want to go in? And they go, yes, we do want to go in. And immediately you have to think about what the inside of this place is like, you have to think about who runs this place, and you have to think about what kind of stuff they have. And when you're thinking about who runs the place, you then wonder, why are they there? And you think, do they have any other relations in the town? Do they have other relations in other places? Do they have an agenda while they're here? All these questions have been prompted purely by the curiosity of the players. And as the adventure continues, this world will grow, and you'll end up relying less and less on coming up with things on the fly. The thing you need to be able to do if you improv stuff is that you do need to be able to think about these things quickly, because the players will be expecting an answer from you quickly. This isn't necessarily the case if you are doing a play-by-post method of roleplay on a forum, because you typically have quite a lot of time to formulate what is going on. But still, you do need to be able to create things very quickly. You don't have the time with improv to sit down in a session and map everything out in a huge document, because there's adventure to be having. Keep the fact that the players came up with that piece of information in mind, as we talk about the fact that the main difference between tabletop role-playing and writing is that you don't necessarily have the agency to where the plot goes. You have the story laid out, but how it is navigated isn't up to you. Your players may not even engage with the story that you have before you, though you'll try your best to make the story enticing enough that they will want to engage with it. You'll likely know the things that drive the players, if not the characters, to adventure, and you'll be able to sprinkle those things here and there to give them incentive to follow the plot. One thing you should avoid doing is blatantly railroading the players into going to where you want to go. There are ways that you can subtly guide the players to go to places, like if they go to a crossroads and there are two ways that they can go, both ways can potentially lead to a location you want them to get to, albeit they will take slightly different routes. It's much better to give them a true decision and have their choices make an impact than for you to go, you try to go left, only to realise that the bridge is out, and thus it's impossible to progress. Looks like you're going to have to go right after all! And then one person goes, well actually we could just go through the forests. Oh no, you can't go through the forests, they're much too thick. You'll have to go right. Well, why don't we just fly? I have the magic spell and oh, the magic's not working anymore. Anti-magic storms are brewing overhead. Well, we'll just head back to the village and oh, the bridge that you used to get back to the village, that's currently being repaired. You know, that pesky woodworm. Why do I get the feeling you want us to go right? Oh, no, the choice is entirely yours, and yet the choice is not theirs, because you have systematically eliminated every single choice that they have. In tabletop role-playing, you have to give the players the freedom to do what they wish. When you are writing a story, you are the person who has that freedom to decide what happens to the characters. You created the characters, you dictate what occurs, you, and only you, dictate the flow of the plot. If you are co-writing with somebody else, that responsibility is shared, but ultimately, you two are the only ones that have that agency. When you're tabletop role-playing, all of your players have that agency, and while you control everything that happens in the world, all the NPCs, all the places they go to, you don't control their characters. There are only a few very rare caveats where you gain control of their characters, and they're almost always tied to enchantment magic that compels people to do things against their will. And even then, the players know what's going on in that instance. They know that Burgle the Fighter has been enchanted, and thus isn't acting as he should. If you rob the players of that agency, the one thing that they have in this world, it's not going to be fun at all. It's not going to be fun for them, it's not going to be fun for you, and it's going to ruin the adventure completely. Very quickly, you won't have any players, and you'll have a world that nobody is exploring. A dead world, because you didn't let them explore. And now you're expecting me to talk about another difference between tabletop role-playing and writing. But you know what? I've described the most important one, the major one, the almost all-encompassing one, which is that your players have agency, and that agency will dictate how the story goes. The players will be the ones that come up with the connections that you develop during the story with various characters. They'll be the ones that come up with their own motivations for dealing with the big bad and saving the world. They will have their own pasts, some of which will be tragic. They will have their own little eccentricities, like the fact that the rogue will always pick up any errant coin that they find on the street because they believe it's good luck, or the space adventurer not going out on a full moon because it was on a full moon that their sister was murdered by space bandits. All of these things will build the depth in your story. The setting will have a lot of depth if it is a pre-written campaign, and if you spend a lot of time world building, there will be depth there. But it is your players that bring everything to life, and in a joyously fun way as well, where you'll laugh and you'll joke and you'll have a fun time. Tabletop role-playing is as much a social thing as it is a thing for entertainment. You have the sessions to meet up, catch up on things, and have fun. And it's all about having fun, and that is something that writing shares in common with tabletop role-playing. At least for me. I write because I enjoy writing, and it's a fun pastime. I enjoy creating worlds, creating characters, weaving stories, and you do all of that when you tabletop roleplay, be it as the DM or as a player. You are creating the story together. You are stepping side by side as you go on this journey, and if you think about it, you are all authors of this narrative. You are the main author as the DM, but all of the players are adding their little bit. They are adding that sprinkle of additional lore that you will snatch and seize and build upon. to create a world that they truly get invested in. And if you can get them invested in your story, you have succeeded in storytelling. Because that is the ultimate test, to see if people want to hear about things, they want to learn more. You've presented something that is enticing enough for them to go and discover things. That is the thing that ties the two things together. You're telling a story, be it by yourself when it comes to writing fiction, or with your players when it comes to tabletop role-playing. It's the storytelling that uses many of the lessons that I've already told you about, be it creating characters, plots, worlds, villains, heroes, dealing with character death, dealing with the beginning. The beginning is very important. I go back to that very cliche start. It's there. It has breadcrumbs that lead towards other things and giving hints that maybe there's something bigger going on. There's drama, there's dread, there's that feeling that you must do something. That is an actiony beginning, befitting a fantasy story. Some people will be drawn into it, other people will be like, no, well, I'm sure the army can take care of it, and then you can go, but the army are currently fighting off the barbarians in the east, the tavern keep says. They'll not be here for months, they'll be too late. And with that, you've done a tiny bit more world building. I keep mentioning about the world building and players adding to it, and that's the ultimate thing I'm trying to get across, that the players are going to help you write this story. And rather than resist them, like some people will, you should embrace the things that they give you. These gifts. You are pooling their creative minds. Their minds that are completely different to yours. They will come up with ideas that you couldn't possibly dream of. And you will use those ideas to create a story that they're all so intrinsically tied with. The story that you make will be as much theirs as it is yours. And so, when people think about tabletop role-playing and go, that's nothing like writing a book, tell them they're wrong. Because it's almost exactly like writing a book. The only difference is, you're writing the story with dice rolls and player decisions. You're deciding whether you want to go left or right. You're deciding if you want to pull the switch. You're deciding if you want to make this dodgy deal with a shady merchant to make sure that you can get into the palace without alerting the guards. All of these decisions, they guide the story in a particular way, a way you likely will not expect. But that's where the fun comes in. When things happen that you don't expect. I could talk so much about all different kinds of things that have happened, the directions that my characters have gone, because that's the way the plot ended up taking them. Take my current D&D character, Kiran. He originally started off as a sort of rough and tumble backstreet brawling fighter. He had a mixture of fighter levels, a mixture of rogue, and then I took the Street Fighter Prestige class because it really suited. But as the story went on, and as his plot came to light about trying to find his wife who'd been kidnapped by pirates, it explained why he hated pirates so much, and he'd spent so many years sailing about trying to find them, he started to get a bit overwhelmed by the desire for vengeance. He reveres a deity of vengeance, retribution, liberation, and was at the turning point. He could have gone one way or another. He could have descended on a darker path that would have led him straight into evil, he's scared of good, or he could seek a higher meaning to what he's doing. And that is what he did, with the guidance of some of his party members. And he went on to become a holy liberator, a divine champion for his god. Something I never anticipated would happen. I was basically taking up the fighter role because my previous fighter had died, but because of what was going on, I didn't anticipate that the boat journey that we were on would highlight things like his hatred of slavery and his hatred of pirates, and the plot, actually, the DM worked in the leader of the pirate faction that we were going after being the one who kidnapped his wife. And that gave my character such a powerful incentive. That fight against that pirate lord was a fight that I will never forget, all because the DM worked with my character's story and worked it into the narrative and made it something unforgettable. Much like when you have a story before you in the pages of a book, and it calls out to you in a way that makes you empathize with the characters so utterly. Except this time, the character is your character. You have created this character. They are your persona in this world that you are helping the DM develop by exploring it and deciding upon what you're going to do. And whether you win or you lose, it's a fun time. I have been tabletop role-playing for absolutely ages, and I have to say that a lot of the things that I have learnt for storytelling have come from playing in tabletop role-playing sessions. And in time, things that I learnt while writing stories impacted how I ran tabletop sessions myself. And it all ties into each other in a circle of learning and growing, and it's just so knotted together. That's what I'm trying to get across here in my long ramble here about my character, is that they are so very similar. There are so many things that work together, but you do have to remember the things that are different. The fact that the players have their agency. You need to respect that agency. And if you can do that, it doesn't matter what adventure you go on. It'll be fun. You'll have a great time. They'll want to have more tabletop role-playing sessions, and before you know it, you'll be telling all kinds of stories that will stick with you forever. And that's the joy of tabletop role-playing. It's the joy of writing stories that stick with you. The only difference is when it's tabletop is that it's all of you that are telling the story together. And with that, that is my fairly rambly explanation as to the similarities of tabletop role-playing and writing. I hope it helps you when it comes to thinking about how you run your own tabletop sessions, or how you write your stories. Just know that they're a lot more similar than you think. If you want me to talk about more specific things concerning tabletop role-playing sessions that I've had, be sure to let me know in the comments. Or if you want me to talk about an aspect of writing I haven't mentioned, be sure to mention it there too. Also, if you want me to talk about anything concerning the Threnody of Dusseldom, you can ask about that here. As a note, Chapter 4 of the Threnody of Dusseldom is now available if you want to check it out at kikoskia.com/writing/Dusseldom, spelled DUSTLEDOM. You can find the link to that in the description. And so, when we come back, more writing and me. Will it be about books, or will it be about tabletop role-playing, or will it be about the Threnody of Dusseldom? I'll let you decide. And so, I'll catch you next time, folks, and I'll see you then. Later.